This of January at 2 p.m. at Lover Run. Is that good?
Yeah.
And the suspects are.
Thank you.
It turns out that in asking to go in person for this meeting, it turns out that we are precursors for everybody having to do this, because the term working group is no longer what turned out. That working group has the same transparency requirements that committee has. So it was all for now. So from now on, we're going to be meeting probably in a hybrid mode like this. I had a meeting, I went to the legislative committee meeting yesterday. Yeah. And I think they're going to be at the new Silver Diner.
Well, I think Helen is going to book a room here and Herschel is going to scope out the diner, and then we have a backup here if that isn't appropriate, so.
Good move.
It looks like the library, which is like,
Yeah.
I mean,
But
we have West Florida Central.
When the library doesn't open until 10.
Oh.
That's what was said yesterday.
Yeah, which would be fine for us.
Right.
We could do that. Okay, is Paul on board yet? Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and start. I had intended to start with Paul, as a matter of fact, to give us
I
an
am here.
update on his. Oh, good. Oh, good.
Here.
Sorry, I was running a little late.
So I see you. I see you. So Paul, do you want to give us an update on your transit strategy plan?
Good afternoon. Yes, I appreciate you letting me come talk to you again. I do have a presentation. It is the same presentation I gave to our internal technical working group yesterday. There is a lot of information. It took me approximately an hour to get through the presentation yesterday because there is so much information in it. I will move through this very quickly. I will have this available for you to look at in more detail. I just have not been able to, because of the holidays, because of the timing of the meetings that we've had recently, I was not able to cut this down and focus it for this group, but I don't think it'll hurt for you to have all the information. As I said, I will go through this very quickly, and then we can take some time to speak about your concerns and if there's anything that we need to include.
Great, thank you.
Can you see the presentation on the screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. This is an update on the Arlington County Transit Strategic Plan. This was an update for the technical working group. What we're going to talk about today is the gap analysis. We have at this point gone through our current conditions. We've had a public outreach period, and with taking the current conditions and the public outreach, we have a gap analysis that starts to identify the places in the county and the things we need to do to the system to provide the proper kind of service to Arlington County. This is our Transit Bureau vision and mission. This is very high level how we look at service in the county and how we view the work we do. This is the schedule for the rest of the project moving forward. We had the internal technical committee yesterday. Today I'm speaking with you, and you can see the various other groups that we are going to be talking to. One thing about this presentation, as we go to meet with our leadership and transportation, the county administrator and the board members, this is to get feedback from them regarding how they would like us to move forward. The next step in the process is going to be making service recommendations. So the gap analysis is going to kind of outline where we view the gaps and what we need to address. And then if there are things that we've missed in that gap analysis, we want to capture that now so that when we move into the service recommendations, that we are addressing everything that is a concern to people. So again, the reason we're coming here is to get your input and make sure that we're touching on everything we need to touch on. This summary of the public engagement, there was an online feedback form and 7 pop-up events that we had. In particular, this the event at Dinwiddie and Columbia Pike in the Arlington Mills Community Center was extremely successful. I was at I think 5 of these overall. I thought it was one of the better outreaches that I've been involved with, and I've been working in transit since about 2006. And I really think it was a successful outreach. One of the things we talked about with our public outreach is we wanted to get responses regarding the goals that we have for the system. And you can see the response to the goals. Our goal on deploying infrastructure equitably and creating a resilient community through environmentally sustainable transportation was very, very high. Go ahead.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Is it possible to close some of the other parts of the screen to make the PowerPoint larger? Close the meeting notes, minimize your pictures up top? Thank you. Whatever you can do. You guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
good point.
It's hard
Glorious,
to
thank
see.
Yeah, it is hard to see.
I am not sure.
Whatever, that's fine. Whatever, that's fine.
Okay, I apologize. I'm not completely familiar with how to improve the screen, but hopefully this will be sufficient. As I said, the equity and environmental sustainability were the highest and most important to the community, I believe, from what I understand. And
Well, it goes way down after that, doesn't it? The agreement with the other goals are not very strong at all. Am I reading that right?
So goals 1, 2,
Oh, I see.
1, 2, and 4.
It has to add to 100%.
Yeah. So
Okay.
you'll see that for all our goals, there was pretty good agreement. The 1, 2, and 4, the kind of safety and quality and performance wasn't as highly agreed upon, but still was way over 50%. I think all the goals that we presented were over 75% agree or strongly agree. So it does appear that we did hit the mark on that.
Yeah, I think we feel the same way. The goals look very good to me anyway, from a older adult standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So in the online survey and at the online excuse me, in the in-person events that we had, there was a board that gave you options for things that are most important to you, and essentially it was choose 3 of these, and you can see the response rates to the side. And these are listed in order by the total of what we received. The most important thing to people is buses and trains that come frequently. That had the highest percentage. One that was very interesting to me was waiting areas that feel safe, well lit, and secure. And I think this is partially due to the fact that you can see that the in-person response rate was higher than the online response rate. The in-person, I think you're catching people who do actually use the bus. I think also people from the elderly population also had this as one of the more important things, but I thought that was interesting that that was a big disparity in response rate for that. The other fairly large disparity was the coverage or buses and trains that come close to where I live. When we were out in the field, we were engaging with people at bus stops using the bus at transit stations, so they are able to access the bus, whereas people online may be wanting to use the bus. It just does not come close to where they are. So those were two interesting things that I noticed from the response rates here. The second,
Paul,
yes.
Paul, let me interrupt. We have a couple of people here who haven't seen the original briefing, and I guess we should make it clear that this strategy that you're working on has to do mainly with ART buses. It doesn't include the rail systems, as I understand it. It's mostly ART, and it doesn't include Metro bus.
So
that right?
It doesn't focus on that. What we're talking about is ART service, but we have to make considerations for WMATA bus and the rail and all the other transportation modes that we have in the county. So while what we're doing is making recommendation for the ART service, but we are very aware of what Metro Bus is doing with their bus network redesign. They're developing a framework for a regional transportation system. What we're trying to do is figure out how we can deploy the ART service to support that regional transportation system, provide access for residents of Arlington County, and then supplement that regional system in the county as needed. So if you think about the regional system, and I see a few questions, but as you think about the regional system, we are very aware of that. We are not making specific recommendations on either rail or the bus network in this study, but we are involved with WMATA making recommendations to their bus network redesigned and any services in addition to ART. So it's interconnected, but yes, we are focusing on ART service. And then there were a couple questions I saw.
Yeah. I'm just curious about the, well, it is actually the highest is that they come frequently. And that you haven't, but also one of them is that there's a safe and well-lit and secure service zone at 17%.
Yeah.
Does that mean that, I mean, I would look at that and say that most people, there's only 17, that's only at 17% because most of the places are safe and well lit. Is that fair? I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that, you know, higher.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
When they're trying, they find to say,
I guess.
it's still, even though it's only 17%, it is one of the higher indicated on the list. I think there are a lot of places that are safe and well lit, but there are some places, particularly in the more suburban areas, that maybe don't have the same type of infrastructure. Particularly in older suburban areas, don't have the same type of infrastructure, don't have good lighting because of trees and maybe a lack of street lighting. So it's Something that we note, we do have a program that is ongoing to improve all the bus stops in Arlington County to bring them up to ADA compliance. Obviously, as we are improving them, we are looking for opportunities with ridership to install benches, lighting, and shelters if needed. So it was one of the high,
Observation.
excuse me.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, the difference between the in-person and online response to that, and I'm always puzzled. I have a bias, and it seems to me that if in person, you're frequently influenced by the guy who sits next to you or somebody else. And so you may vote the way they did, or you may vote against them if you don't like it. But, you know, it's a curious difference.
Well,
It-
the
it-
real-time arrival information also ranks pretty highly, doesn't it? Is that an indication that you might consider putting in more alert information on the system?
We're gonna get to that in a little bit, because there were
Okay,
some
good.
stuff, so
fine.
it is, let me keep moving, and we definitely come back to that. The second question that we had was, what is your biggest challenge when you use transit today? And again, frequency was at the top of this list. That didn't come as much of a surprise. That is typically one of the most important things to people. Also, buses and trains do not come at the time I need to travel. Again, you'll see a disparity here between the in-person and online. And from my speaking to people in the field, if you're a shift worker and you go into work from like 4 o'clock in the evening till midnight, and the bus isn't running after midnight when you get off, then you're not able to make that trip and you need to find a different way to travel. So again, I think that that talks about people who actually use the system and maybe people who would like to use the system or have different needs. And it's just something that's interesting to see that difference in the online and in person. Um, I have other options. Here's the coverage again, um, transferring and feeling safe, which was something that was important on the last side, but not as important on this slide for whatever reason. And then here, and this is, it's going to come back to the real time, but it also goes into other things that we're going to talk about. I don't have enough information to make my trips using transit. And this is something I heard in the field quite a bit. So we will talk about that in a little bit. So with that information and a lot of other analysis that we did, there is a large appendix associated with this. We took all that information and we came up with a list of the gaps that we need to fill countywide to improve the system. And these are basically system-wide gaps to start out with. And I'm going to move through these fairly quickly. I don't want to go through the slides in too much detail, but I'm going to get through this quickly because there is about 15 slides, I think, with just the system-wide gaps. So frequency, obviously, one of the first things that we heard and we noticed in the public outreach, that seems to be what is important to people, having buses that are frequent, where you maybe don't even have to rely on a schedule as much if you have enough frequency. If a bus comes every 5 or 10 minutes and you miss a bus by a few minutes, you don't have that long a wait. If you have a half hour or an hour and you miss a bus by a few minutes, that severely delays your trip and can be, actually make it so you don't have the opportunity to take that trip using public transit. Uh, Increase span of service on targeted routes. One of the things we heard, some of the open-ended questions and talking to people was that, you know, weekdays, weekday middays, evenings, and weekends, there is a desire for more service during those off-peak times. This is also something that we are seeing industry-wide, where the ridership on weekdays, middays, the off-peak times and weekends has been fairly resilient. And with the way that people are working now, with the amount of teleworking and things like that, the actual peak commute is not as important. So one of the things that we think we need to look at is where we can increase span of service and provide transportation during those off-peak hours that have been more resilient and seem to be becoming more important. Improved reliability. The reliability of the bus is important because if you are trying to plan a trip, you need to know that the bus is going to be there, it's going to be on time, and it's going to get you to where you need to go on time. If you have a private vehicle and someone put traffic cones in the back of your driveway and say you can't leave as you're walking out the door for work, obviously that isn't going to work for you. And it's the same thing with bus travel, public transit. You need to have that reliable transportation so your trips can be planned. You can get to where you need to go. If you have an appointment, if you have work, it's one of the cornerstones of being able to use the system. One of the things here is improve reliability.
How does the 85% number compare with other transportation systems? Let's say Dash or whatever. Is that pretty good or pretty bad?
It is pretty good. Our target is 95%, but a lot of systems, I think WMATA hovers around 75%. Somewhere in that range. Bigger systems usually have a lower on-time performance, depending on also the variability of traffic in a city. It can also, there can be a lot more variability than you would find in some other places. So 85% is good. Our target is 95%, which, is, I would say is almost aspirational, but I don't think that there is a need to change that. That is what we want to shoot for. I mean, we want to shoot for 100%, but in general, again, if 85%, if 2 out of every 10 days that you're trying to go to work, you were delayed because the bus didn't show up. That's tough. That's so we do want to be more reliable. People did suggest that should have been one of the goals that we have. With the goals, we are going to have objectives that are that go with those goals, and I think that there is a place that can be put and monitored and measured so that we keep that front and center on where we are.
Just a quick question. Is there
Yes.
a difference between the bus didn't show up? Is there a difference between the bus didn't show up and the bus was running late?
Yes, there's a difference between the bus. That would be a missed trip. That is, a little more behind the scenes how we handle it and penalties that we can assess to the operator. But the bus being late, there's a difference between the bus being late by 3 minutes and a bus being late by over 5 minutes. That is also a thing. And one of the other things that comes into on-time performance, the bus can't be early. It's probably better to be a few minutes late than the bus being a few minutes early because you get out there and you, so that is like really bad. That's one of the worst. But again, go ahead.
Just a follow-up question. I appreciate everything that you've done in terms of focus groups and surveys. I also assume that you're using data in terms of how many people are riding routes throughout the
Mhm.
day, what your numbers are on each bus. Are
Yeah.
those counts done regularly, or are they special counts that are done only periodically throughout the year?
Uh, we have, we use farebox data primarily for our data. Every time someone taps a card or if it's a free ride, the operator pushes a key and that tells us anybody who's getting on the bus for every trip. We also have uh, automatic passenger counters on the bus that count by time of day. It's a little more hard to extract that information. It's not quite as accurate as the fare box information, but using the combination of the two, we are able to make good estimations for when people are riding, where they're riding, what bus stops have the most ridership. We use that in particular for bus stop improvements. If we find a bus stop that has a certain amount of ridership, it would be warranted for having a shelter and things like that. So, yeah, we are using a lot of data, and you will see some of that in the appendix if
Thank
you
you.
look at this later on. Next gap, create a more efficient transit network route design. And this is, basically what we are doing with the strategic plan overall. We're identifying gaps where we can better match the customer need. We're looking at population growth. We're looking at employment growth. We're looking at travel patterns. Um, we're looking at how the art system interacts with other modes of transportation. So this is very key. It also gets into cost effectiveness and our fare box recovery and passengers per revenue hour. Obviously, with new travel patterns after the pandemic, our performance measures of we have not been meeting our performance measures. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to reevaluate our performance measures to determine if they are correct for what we are doing now. Overall, designing the system for the needs of the travel needs of the residents of Arlington County today is what we're focused on. Better accuracy and access to real-time information. We recently changed over from one real-time system to another real-time system, and there has been some bugs in the system and the way it's operated. Unfortunately, there's always a little bit of growing pains when you change a system like this, but this is something that the way people interact with transit nowadays, you don't necessarily want to look at a schedule. You may look at a schedule to plan your trip, but you don't look at the schedule to know when to go out and get your bus. You may want to stand in the lobby, look at your phone, say, hey, the bus is coming down the road. I'm going to walk out when it's about 5 minutes away so I don't have to stand in the cold for a long period of time. Another thing that, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Another thing that we heard is that you'll often see just the printed schedules at bus stops. People would like to see more real-time passenger information at the bus stop. When I was in the field during the public outreach, there were a lot of people that brought this up. And while we have real-time at major transit centers, this was even talking about just at regular bus stops. Because having that information, we want the system to be reliable. Things happen, the bus can be late. Having the information to know what's going on is extremely important to people. So that was one of the things that really came out of this is the way people are interacting with the bus. the proliferation of mobile devices, and the fact that people want to know when the bus is actually going to be there, not look at a paper schedule and assume that it's going to be there on time, is what we understood. So improvement of our real-time data and accuracy is something that was really came out, particularly in the public outreach in the field. Improve the rider experience on board and at waiting areas. Again, this goes back to the improvement at bus stops to have a comfortable, well-lit area, also accessible, having the proper pedestrian connections. You know, one of the things that was talked about was policing of fare evasion and mentally unstable individuals. Sometimes we'll have people that don't have a home that may take up residence in a shelter somewhere. And we get calls about that, and we have to coordinate with our human resources, human services people to see if there's things that we can do to help people. Then occasionally we have to call the police, but that is, taking care of the symptom, not remedying the underlying problem. It's very difficult for us because we're a transit agency, not a health and services agency, but it's something that needs to be understood because it also affects the comfortability and potentially the feelings of safety at a bus stop if you have people that are there, taking up a residence in a shelter and the sanitary implications of that. Accessibility for older adults and persons with mobility challenges, more services for older adults. And that came a lot from talking to this group right here and the larger group. I heard very specifically patience for bus drivers to have patience for people that are older adults. And some of this is customer service, some of this is improvement of the service of the system, capital and service. So again, something that we heard that we expect to look for ways to improve, and obviously safety is a part of this. But safety is something that you can't put out of service. If we can't guarantee safety on the bus, then we shouldn't be providing that service. And address underserved or low-income and minority groups. This goes back to the online survey and what we heard in the field, just making sure that we are providing access to communities, underserved communities, people who need it. This has always been a pillar of transit, providing a transportation for those that don't have any other options for transportation. We are bound by our Title VI, but we also look for other ways to reach out to those communities and help them understand what their options for transportation are.
Hey, Paul.
Yes.
Can you clarify what that previous slide means? Does that mean, you need to change the routes or lower the cost, or what does that mean? Address underserved low-income minority groups.
It's a variety of things. We have a pilot where we are looking at reduced fares for people that are in certain I forget the exact program, but I think it's TANF to have free fares for them, potentially looking at free fares. Another part of this goes back to, and I think it comes up in a little bit, is communication. One of the things we heard was that we don't communicate well, particularly with people who speak Spanish. And that was actually a surprise to me. We do provide all our information in English and in Spanish, but it was a repeated concern that I heard, which I was not aware of. So I think that ties in to this also. So I think it's one, looking for opportunities to as you said, have reduced and lower fares, but also communicating with populations that have been historically underserved, understanding what their needs are, and making sure that you're hearing what those needs are and addressing them.
You know, I would say that there are two issues there. One is people knowing about that they can qualify for low income fares, and the second, being able to access that fare. So, you know, if you have to go to a Metro Center place to get something approved, to get, you know, Metro discounts, it's not as convenient as having some kind of mobile facility that would periodically drive up to your residence, like Culpeper Garden, and, you know, have people be able to come downstairs and get access to low income fares. So that's one point, just how readily, even when people know about it, how easy is it for them to access it and get it without being inconvenienced themselves? And then I think the second is, you know, price is one factor. And as you've said, simple access is another factor. You know, when we're talking about older adults, they're not able to walk several blocks to a bus stop. So they really are looking for more door-to-door kind of transportation, like, you know, a route that goes from Culpeper Garden to Virginia Hospital Center, someplace where they're going on a regular basis and they can easily get on a bus, get there and get off the bus. I'm just sharing and offering more comment, not looking necessarily for a response from you right now.
No, understood.
You probably should know that she does a lot with A and B, the neighborhood villages, transportation. So she has always had a lot of great insight into this problem. I have a question about the, what do you call them? The collective transportation modes. I know that COG has done a lot of studies on what kind of transportation collections you should have in various income areas. And their decision was that if it is a low income area, you should emphasize buses. And so you should make sure that there's a lot of buses going through that area as opposed to rail, which is a little more expensive. Do you do the similar thing?
Yeah, we're going to talk about a transit propensity index here in a little bit that looks at those factors. I did want to address the previous comment. I completely agree with you. I think that is the same analysis that I had, which you were talking about. I've seen specific examples of when people first they need to know that they qualify for these programs, and second, how do you deliver those programs? So I think that was a very good comment. And to the second comment, yes, we're going to talk about transit propensity and how that functions here shortly.
And Paul, I would like to ask about a certain art route. It's Route 53 A and B, which has very low ridership.
Okay.
Service time. I live 2 blocks from Williamsburg Boulevard where I can pick that up. But the hours now are like from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then from 2:30, I think it is, till 7. It's very limited. And I used to have foreign students staying at my house and they used that. And then when the time changed on it, when it wasn't all day long, they adapted, but was less convenient. I use it occasionally if I want to go into Washington to the National Gallery or something like that. But I have to plan my time so carefully so that when I get back to East Falls Church Metro, I can get the bus that will take me back home. So is there any way that the service hours would ever be longer? And what does ART do to encourage people to use their buses?
That's a good question. I mean, we haven't gotten really down into the specifics, but I'm obviously aware of 53 and the challenges we've had with that route. And in general, the service to North Arlington and how to make that successful. I think one of the things that you just touched on, which we talked about earlier, is the fact that the commute is less important and people are looking for all-day service and weekend service. Are we really providing transit if we aren't providing excuse me, a somewhat frequent service for a longer span during the day? Is it really, are we really giving it a chance? And if that doesn't work, are there other things that we need to look at? So yeah, 53 A and B are definitely on the radar, along with 61 and 62 that are kind of some lower performing routes. And can we combine those routes? Can we combine those routes, increase frequency? Where are the areas that we can, improve that? But that will come out in the next round of this when we start getting into our specific recommendations, but definitely on the radar. And I agree with your assessment of, the fact that is it really useful if we're only using those limited hours?
And of course, there's no weekend service. How many of the art routes have weekend service? Are they 7-day-a-week routes? There must be some of them.
Yeah, I think there are 6 or 7, and one route is 5 days plus Saturday. Again, one of the things that we're absolutely looking into is the expansion of this span of service to off-peak hours and weekend hours. And that's in general, and making.
I think so. I think weekend hours could be useful. Saturday, just Saturday. I think you might have a different group of people riding the bus.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's something that is on our radar and that we are looking to see how to address that. Next goal. Go ahead.
Paul, you're never going to be able to finish this. I'm sorry, but that brings up a question. The last time we met, you said that it's possible to gain some statistics that are older adult oriented or specific. Have you done that? Is that available yet?
I
Like
have not.
ridership, for example.
I have not. I actually I'll see what I can pull on that. And I will send that to this committee. So you have a chance.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. I apologize that I didn't have that for you today. Increase attractiveness of transit to achieve agency goals. This is essentially making sure that we are making transit an attractive and viable option for people. How do we do that? I think there sometimes is some stigma around bus travel. How can we make the bus more attractive? The reliability issues, the cleanliness issues, the going to where you needed to go. So that is something that we want to do. We want people to look at transit as equal to getting in the car and going somewhere. Excuse me. Consider
Paul, on the last slide, hey, Paul, on the last slide, you had revenues on there. Is that an issue? There was an article in the paper yesterday saying that transit agencies have a sharp, drop off in ridership. Therefore, revenues are a problem. San Francisco is going to shut down 2 out of their 5, BART lines. Is that something in the picture here? How does the funding affect ART?
Funding's always an issue. And it's an issue with any program, as you're aware. I mean, when it's not about money, it's about money, right? Yeah, there has been a drop. We used to be able to recover about 20% of the cost of the service through fares, and that has dropped down to about 10% at this time. So that is something that we need to look at. 20% obviously still doesn't cover everything. So it is, it is not a cheap. It, it does take funding to run the service. So on a lot of
Well,
these.
that,
Go ahead.
that brings out a question on the other end of the spectrum, with many, particularly bus services deciding that they're going to go fareless. Is that is that an option in the for Arlington, for the ART?
This is the next gap. Consider more affordable and free transit service. That was something that we heard a lot. The revenue, like I said, we were capturing about 20 to 25% of the revenue recovery. If we're only capturing 20% and now 10%, does it make sense to go free? And this also ties into the funding we receive from the state. The size of the amount of people that you carry and the size of your system is the main factor in determining how much support you get from the state when you are providing service. So the grant funding, the subsidy we get for the state could go up and partially take in for those free transit services. As you're aware, Dash has gone fare free, and their ridership is up 110% from pre-pandemic. That also has to do with their redesign. Also because there's some shifting around of metro routes and Dash routes, but that is absolutely something that we heard. It's something that we are considering, and I know that there is some political support for it in this county. So that is something that we are going to be looking at moving forward. In addition to the free fares pilots that we have for people who are in the TANF program, and for students in Arlington County are now able to all ride free, and working on routes to help get students to school. We wouldn't take over the yellow bus, but it's, that's something that we are thinking about.
Hey, Paul, on the funding, do you have any trends? What is the trend during COVID? Have revenues gone down? Can you give us an idea? You must have some past trends or future forecasts.
Well, like I said, the fare box recovery has gone from about 20% to about 10%. There was a period of time that we were running free during the pandemic, which we weren't collecting any fares at that point. What we have seen from basically since the beginning of the pandemic, except for a drop last year around this time when there was a huge spike in COVID, there's been steady growth. It's been slow, but it's been steady, returning growth to the system. So over time, really, what the biggest hit to all of transit and the rail in particular was the people working from home. That is a commuter-based system, and that's where most of the ridership on rail came from. While there are some routes that were specifically geared to the commuters, a lot of our services go through places where people don't have other options for transportation, and those services stayed relatively strong throughout the period. So the trend is, yes, everything's down across the board. there is growth slowly coming back. We're not sure where that's going to level off. And then, as I said, a place like Alexandria and I believe Fairfax City, who have both gone fare free, have seen growth of they are at 110%. Over, not 100%, 10% over, but like 10% over where they were pre-pandemic. So that's kind of what the trend is. I don't have any specific numbers here, but it's something we could probably get.
Yeah, I don't know if you can tell us yet, but do you foresee any service cuts or routes being cut?
Right now, so we're moving into the recommendations. I don't see anything getting cut in the next few years. I mean, that's why we're doing this study. What I would like to see is a redistribution of the, if there are services that are going to be cut, is look at it as a redistribution and look where we can either enhance other routes or come up with new routes. That's one of the things that we need to look at. It's not only improving the routes that we have, but designing of new routes that may have opportunities. We can look. There's some data later in this that talks about trips between different areas and where could we connect those areas with transit. Would that make sense? Is there enough to do that? So that is. At this time I don't see any cuts, but that is always a possibility. Most of the funding for transit comes from, the state and the general fund, and there's a lot of other needs and pressures that are on the general fund. So, that's why funding is important.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Identified gaps in these enhanced bus roadway infrastructure for provision of service. Talking about in Arlington County, we have limited curb space to put bus stops. Also talking about opportunities for bus lanes and queue jumps and transit signal priority to help speed the bus through the service area. Okay, so those were like the system-wide gaps, things that we are looking at overall for the system. We are also looking at geographic and travel pattern gaps. Again, we're not to the point where we're making specific recommendations at this point, but we're identifying places in the county where we see these gaps. The Pentagon Crystal City area, Langston Boulevard, Glebe Road, Old Dominion, Glen Carlin, and Long Branch Creek. We look at our equity gaps, and there's a couple of maps coming up, and you can see these areas in the county that have potential equity gaps and opportunities for additional service. This equity gap analysis, a bivariate map that shows the equity population versus the number of trips in areas. So as you can see, and I want to point out, this is ART only. These are ART-only trips, and you can see here at the western end of Columbia Pike, here in Pentagon City, these areas that have high low-income and minority populations, and could, when you compare that to the amount of transit that is there, that seems like we could put more transit in to help these populations. However, you look at the next slide, this is ART and WMATA combined. And you can see that it shifts around those areas. There's still these pink areas and purple areas, but you see how the areas shift around when you include WMATA and ART together. So as we talked about earlier, we're not making specific recommendations on WMATA, but this shows how we have to have awareness when we're looking at all this analysis of where to provide improvements. So this is an example of some of the analysis that we've been doing. Ridership demands, the Long Branch Creek area may warrant some additional service. based on the amount of ridership and transit trips, population growth, obviously Crystal City and Potomac Yards, huge population growth, employment growth, Northwest Arlington, Langston Boulevard, Virginia Hospital Center, I would say Pentagon City did not make it onto this slide, but I think Pentagon City is obviously another place that may warrant additional service. This is interesting, the Virginia Hospital Center, we're talking about employment growth, but they are also building a 2,000 car garage there. So while there seems to be an opportunity, this is sometimes where you need to even dig deeper into the analysis. Is this really going to be a need if there's a 2,000 car garage at the hospital center? It's in the middle of a suburban neighborhood. Now, there still may be a need. I'm not saying that nobody's going to take the bus there, but a lot of the workers may be just taking their car. But we would still need access for other people. So this is very interesting. It stands out as one of the areas with employment growth, but maybe, you have to look deeper and you have to layer analysis onto what is going on in the area. And then specific areas that have multiple. Go ahead.
I noticed the absence of any reference in terms of gaps to the Clarendon or Boston areas. So I assume that everyone feels that that's pretty well served.
Yeah, when you talk about the number of transit trips that go through Clarendon and Boston, it's tremendous, and that doesn't even include the rail being there. We're just talking about the bus trips. Those are two of the highest areas for bus trips. So at this point, we haven't seen the opportunities there, but these other areas, where are you going to connect them to? You're going to connect them to Boston. You're going to connect them to Clarendon. You're going to connect them to the Shirlington Transit Center. So there may be, that goes back to the gap with lack of space and curb space. So these are some of the things that we've identified. Again, I would say Pentagon City should have been on this list. I'm not sure why it didn't make it there. And then here's some analysis on the transit system. Most receive over 1,000 bus trips per day. You can see Virginia Square has 949. Arlington Cemetery and Ronald Reagan National Airport have no bus service. A lot of people talk about the airport. I would say, a lot of people talk about thinking, oh, I would like to take a bus to the airport, but really for a sustainable transit system, are there employees that need to go there every day that would use the bus? So these are two, they're rail hubs and have no bus service, but there's, when you look at the analysis and think about it, it kind of makes sense. Boston, as you can see here, 2,270 bus trips per day, and 647 of those are ART. So you can see the amount of Metro bus service that comes through Boston. And Courthouse is obviously our busiest hub for ART. We have many of our services that terminate here, and we have a small little not transit center, but several bays out in front of the Bozeman area that we serve. We have below average levels of ART service at the Pentagon, and the Pentagon is the largest transit hub, I think, in the state, if I'm not mistaken. But that is primarily for regional our regional providers that provide so much service there. And there's Metro bus service that comes through Arlington, picks up Arlington residents and takes it to the Pentagon. So at first glance, you might say, well, why don't we have any service at the Pentagon? It's because there's a lot of service at the Pentagon and it may not be necessary. So again, you have to dig deeper sometimes when you see things that are a little different like that. Right here, Metro serves that, and the network we could look for opportunities to help strengthen that network, potentially providing more frequency along those corridors, or making sure that we're connecting people to that high frequency network. Activity centers, I'm gonna run through this a little quick. You see a lot of the same names coming up again. Schools, we looked at schools and how many trips are going by the different schools in the county. Wakefield and Yorktown having the fewest, but we also talk about the colleges. Community centers, and I did see a question about Lover Run and Long Beach, I think, come up. Long Bridge, yeah.
Yes.
For
There's a
some,
question in the chat, is that?
yeah, for some reason, Long Branch did not get into the analysis, but we are adding that in. We talked about that yesterday. I do believe Lover Run is included, and I can pull up a slide in a little bit to talk about that, but we did look at the community centers. What was also brought up was the senior assisted living centers. We did not include those, and we will be adding those into this analysis. So these are all the different things we're looking at, and you layer all this information on top of it, of each other, and that's where you can start seeing where the gaps are, where the needs are, where the trips are starting, where the trips are ending, and how you can build a system to address those needs. A lot of the analysis is based on this. The brown, orange areas are COG activity centers. The green areas we added in, these are neighborhoods. They don't qualify as activity centers from COG, but we added them in so we could use them for analysis. These are based on what are called transportation analysis zones. And that is where COG does a lot of their trip analysis. And here you can see daily trips by all modes between all these centers, the activity centers and the neighborhood centers that we identified. The thicker the line, the better, the more connections that come through, and you can see the number of trips that are going through these areas on a daily basis. And this is by all modes, connecting these together. And then here are the public transit trips. And you can see the connections, and particularly down here where we have a robust transit network. And in this area where you see a lot of the connectivity, you can see the thicker lines here, and you can see thinner lines up here, primarily because we don't have the amount of service up here. So another way that we are looking at the county and trying to determine where the connections are and where the opportunities are. And what came out of that is another piece of analysis where we talk about there are more trips going between these two areas, but there are less transit trips. So if you're above the line, there is potentially a lack of transit to make that connection. If you're below the line, there is more transit with fewer trips, and maybe there's an opportunity to redirect that to bring everyone closer to the mean. And this is the top, the lowest ratio where we may have opportunities to connect using transit. Again, layered on top of all the other analysis that we've done. So the next steps, we are going to talk about how we are going to prioritize our users and our goals and come up with specific recommendations for service in the county. The next step will be to actually have those service recommendations. You've looked at the gap analysis, kind of walk through it with you today. We are going to make specific recommendations coming up. And then once we do that, the specific recommendations will go back out to the public. We'll get comment on that. We'll make any adjustments we need to. And then we will develop a funding plan. The service recommendations are going to be a little less constrained. We're going to try to put a lot more on the table than maybe is possible, but to give some options, some trade-offs. But then we need a constrained funding plan moving forward over the next 10 years on how we are going to provide service. And the final recommendations will be packaged into the final Arlington strategic plan. And the board will approve that, and it will essentially serve as guidance over the next 10 years. That doesn't mean it's written in stone. We provide updates every year about what we have implemented, what we haven't implemented, and why, because things change. I don't think anyone predicted what happened with the pandemic. A lot of recommendations from the last TDP were not implemented specifically because the pandemic came and there was, no opportunity to make those changes. So I do see a question.
Yes, I was wondering, in one of your slides, you talked about asking the drivers to be more patient with the elderly riders. And I was wondering, what kind of trainings do you have for your bus drivers?
They are trained significantly. They have customer service training. They have operations training. They are required to do, training year over year. In particular, when we do get complaints about a driver with that has an altercation with someone, we can pull the videotape and then coach that driver. Sometimes people just have bad days, which is unfortunate, and we try to stress to the fact that you need to be very, very patient as a bus driver, because you're dealing with people. And so I don't know specifically because it's handled by our contractor, but I do know that there are hours of training required. And there is refresher training, and then there is coaching and disciplinary action when incidents happen.
I have a comment on this. This was a number of years ago, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I got on a bus at Ballston. And the bus driver, and there weren't very many people on the bus, and I was sitting in the first seat, and the bus pulled out into the street. The supervisor ran out in front of the bus and stopped him and came over the window and said, "You're leaving too early. You have to go around the block and come back and stop." And the guy was 3 minutes early, but he drove around the block and came back and stopped. And then it goes to your point about that not being there when they're expected, or leaving too early is a problem.
Yeah.
It's bad.
And it is.
That was very impressive.
Yeah, leaving early is the
So
worst
you
thing you
guys-
can do.
So as you look to the 10-year plan and dollars, I assume that the biggest cost driver is the bus driver himself, him or herself, in terms of cost versus the equipment. Is there any reason, have you thought about smaller pieces of equipment when you have some of these routes that have low ridership? Is there any savings to be made, not having a whole big bus, but having perhaps a van or something like that? Is that part of the funding decisions that you look at?
It can be, and we've talked about that, and we are, we talk about it. There's some good trade-offs. If you have, standardized, a standardized system, and they're easier to work on, the buses are all the same. When you get down to the smaller, particularly the van type stuff, that's a completely different type of vehicle, and you can't stock the same parts. So you're stocking parts for two types of buses. You need your mechanics trained on two types of vehicles and equipment.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I understand that. Yeah, I just think that the challenge is going to be cost because of bus drivers. And that's, I suspect with Arlington's financial problems, that's going to be a problem short term.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay, well, I guess we need to bring this to a close, Paul. This has been very enlightening. Thank you so much. You've really added a lot to the earlier analysis. We're going to be talking over the next few minutes about what we're planning to do as a committee or a working group or whatever we are now over the next year, over 23. And one of the things that we have pledged to do is to get out more and talk to the older adults. We'll be going to the to the residences, et cetera, and trying to understand what their problems are in transportation. And as we collect this information, we'll certainly cycle it back through you to let you know, what we're finding out. In the meantime, if you'd send us a copy of this in whatever format and whatever data you have on specific ridership of older adults, we'd really appreciate it. We need to stay in touch with you.
Yeah, and as you can see, I'm just cycling through some of the appendix of this where you can see the amount of data. And did Leopard Run get in here? This is schools. Let me see. Oh, anyway, yes, I can send that to you. I will see if I can get the information on this senior ridership to you. And over the next year, if you think it'd be at all helpful if I attended any of these events with you, if you were going out to a community center or something, I would be open to doing that too, because that is one of the things that's important to us. I think that as we mentioned, the communication piece seemed to fall a little short. So I think that would be something that I would be interested in if you would be open to that. So I appreciate you.
You bet. We're very open.
Okay, I appreciate you letting me come talk to you today. I will get you that information soon. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Have a good day.
You too. The next thing on our agenda is to try and look at the SCAT 60+ cafe transportation modes versus STAR, which is we understand under a possible reduction in service. And so Jennifer, you're right in the right place. So do you have any comments on these, on the contract and how you're dealing with it? Any updates?
You're mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I don't believe I have too many updates. I can tell you what we've done since I spoke to you. It's probably been almost a month ago, I guess, at the commission meeting. But for anybody that didn't hear, because of the Red Top not having the contract renewed for Red Top, who has done our Social 60, which is our congregate meal program, transportations for at least 2 decades, and they did our SCAT program, which is Senior Center Adult Transportation. It would take anybody that lived in Arlington to one of our senior program locations for $250 each way, and then we subsidize the rest. Well, with the new vendor that was chosen, we could no longer afford this. It was actually the cost for congregate meal alone would be more than my whole budget for that program to run. So for the Social 60 plus Cafe with the 3 sites, Langston Brown, Arlington Mill, and Walter Reed, we are going to a shuttle service with one of our current vendors that we have that does our transportation for our travel programs. So we've been approved to do that, and we have to go out for a contract for extension for full-time, but this will get us through this year, and at least right now, while we can't use Red Top. And actually, Nick England, I was hoping was going to be able to join us today to listen to all this and give input too, but he's actually out with one of these shuttle buses doing a dry run today. So I think he may still be finishing that up because they had 47 stops to do, but that's if everybody comes that uses transportation on one day. So they were doing the most extreme to see how long. We're hoping from 8 to 3 will, on most days, it won't take that long. So they're doing a dry run of that. The seniors have been notified because we're starting that January 23rd. So it'll start on a Monday because it varies every day. Oh, I'm sorry, what?
Did the dry run that Nick's doing include picking up people, or is he just running the route?
Well, not actually picking up people, but they were stop at each location. So kind of when him and I actually did it in my car one day. And we actually kind of gave a minute or so to pretend like if someone was coming up. And part of our reason for when we ran it a month ago or so was to see if notify, is there any places where a shuttle couldn't go down? Like we found one person's home that I just trying to pull down and turn around. I got yelled at because somebody thought I was trying to take their parking space. I was like, no, I'm just trying to turn around. But the shuttle could have never made it down. But so we were going to talk to that person because she lives like 3 houses down, and we feel like she was probably mobile enough that she could come to the corner. So we were trying to document some of that too. So we're doing that. The SCAT program there's really nothing we could do with that, but we are looking to transfer people that are eligible to the STAR program. And because when I did my stats, and I wanted to share this with you, I can't remember if I shared this last time. Over the last year, we had 28 unique users, so that used it over the year. Only 5 of those participants or users used it more than 30 rides. I think we found 1 or 2 people that used it weekly. So we're actually working with them too. It turns out at least out of that 5, like 2 or 3 of them were already registered with STAR. So that's great if they're registered with STAR because it's easy transition for them. We're looking at getting them STAR coupon books, and especially for anybody that's never used STAR to try it too. But I don't know how long we'll be giving them STAR coupon books, probably maybe through this budget year, depending on the need. But because we can't really monitor, we're just giving out books and they can use those wherever they want to go. But in the past, it was you could only go to a senior center. So, but we have a good tally of who was using it and may need it. And my staff were able to say, Mrs. Smith, she's one that comes every week. And so we're working with them directly too for those participants to try to make sure that they have the needs that they can to get to the centers. I have offered on January 20th where Sabrina Brown and one of her staff from STAR from the customer service center, I guess, is going to come to Lubber Run. We're having on the 20th an information session on transportation. But out of the 30 people or 29 people that we emailed, I've only had 1 person asked to respond. So I'm actually got another letter going in the mail tomorrow back out to them, reminding them here's the date. If you're interested in coming, we're trying to offer a virtual option too, and to even see who all would like the STAR coupon books, because I haven't really heard too much. It was surprisingly quiet. So I don't know if that's a good thing or if people aren't getting the message. So, but I was expecting to get yelled at and nobody yelled at me yet. So, but maybe people are understanding. It's been a great thing going on for a long time. So, but with our biggest concern though, really is going back to, we had to make sure we could get our Social 60 participants to the programs, and that's going to be our things kicking off in a couple weeks. So I can come back and let you all know once it gets going how it's going. The company has said that they're going to try to designate 1 or 2 drivers. So the driver will get to know the route. Our participants will get to know the driver. Starting out, we'll always have a staff person on the bus, but we hope eventually it may get to a point where we don't, but we might look to train some volunteers or have someone that's always on the bus, because if somebody's not there, we need to make a phone call to find out if they're coming or maybe they decided to cancel. So, because we do have a lot of last minute cancellations for that program. So
Now, this is the shuttle. This is the shuttle driver you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you looked at usage availability? One of the things that concerned us was the idea that STAR may be under a reduction of service. And yet you're going to be relying on STAR to some extent here.
Yes, and that's the first, I had never been told that Star was looking at reductions also, but it's really, to me, it's the same process, sometimes the same vehicles. It sounds like they might be using, even though we were using Red Top, I guess, for Star or for SCAT. But I don't think we're gonna, Sabrina didn't seem to feel like when I talked to her, it was gonna be that big of a hit on them because it's really only a couple people a week when it comes down to it. It's not like if we were trying to use STAR to get our congregate mill folks, that would have been a huge impact. But the SCAT program is not that big of an impact, being that we use maybe 5 people use it regularly. We do have a few people. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, senior loops is another usage there that would, might impinge on this. Have you looked at that?
No, I don't have anything to do. That's run. I've talked to Rachel and Helen some, but that's totally in their shop. We don't, because we haven't been able to use the senior loops because it's just senior living facilities to, I believe, grocery stores. So they don't come. I think at one point they may have been looking to come to community centers, but I don't know if that has ever been worked out. Because that would, if that ever was, that would be beneficial because like the Claridge House is one location that we plan to make one stop and fill the van up. Because the shuttle bus we're using fits, I think, 13 or 14 people. And sometimes we can have 10 to 20 people come from there a day. So a location like there would be greatly beneficial.
Do you have usage numbers on all of this? It would be really helpful for us to know how much usage you're getting here. So, we've advocated for these programs and it would help us to advocate further.
Okay. I don't know if the SCAT numbers help you, but you definitely want, because I feel like those were actually lower when I ran those numbers, but would you want it for the congregate mill program or the social 60 plus?
Sure.
Yeah, because I have an overall view and I can't even off top of my head, I want to say it was like, I'm going to have this number wrong because it's been a lot, like 30,000 rides we did last year. But let me try to get some of those numbers together because Nick and I have been pulling that stuff together when we realized that everything wasn't going to work out with Red Top and the new vendor wasn't going to work for us. We were really shuffling and could they have days and days of manifest of that stuff. So trying to compile it all to useful data. We do have some of that. So I'll get that over to you.
Jennifer, it'll be really useful because, the county manager is reaching out to commissions and advisory boards and having a meeting with the heads of those to either share information on what the budget outlook looks like or to get input from them as to what priorities should be. So knowing whether the shuttle buses that you have now are sufficient would be nice to know. You don't have to make that assessment if you could just give raw data.
Well, we don't know. We won't know that until the 23rd, probably till February, really, until we settle into it for a couple weeks. Yeah.
We'll go February 23rd, you said?
January 23rd, it starts.
Okay, but you sort of have a sense right now of how long the route would take in the best of circumstances, namely not picking people up. Do you have a rough idea of how long an average trip is going to be?
That's
From
what
when
we're
the shuttle bus starts out to when it arrives.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's until we actually run it with picking up the people and we think it's gonna like the morning routes are gonna take an hour, but not everybody's on that. We pick up a few people, then they get dropped at a center. We're trying to do each center by itself. Like Arlington Mill will start earlier. Most of the sites will be out, like there may be some people that are on the bus for 30 minutes. For the majority of the people right now, we don't believe they'll be on that long. So it might be a little longer than some of their cab rides, but the transportation is actually very nice. And we're looking at even trying to do they have TVs on there so we could play some different videos, whether it's something a program that we have done, or maybe our 55 plus live, just to kind of keep people entertained. We've even talked about maybe doing bingo or program, keep the program going on the bus to keep people entertained so they're just not kind of bored sitting on the bus, especially for those that might be a little longer. There may be some
What,
people that
next
we
you
have
can
to
serve-
reshuffle. Oh, sorry.
Next, you can serve wine.
Oh, that would be nice. That would probably pull people in.
Yeah, but I mean, Jennifer, just what you're saying, that you think a ride for a person might be around 30 minutes, maybe a little longer. I mean, that's not an unreasonable transit time.
Right.
So it'd be interesting to see what it actually turns out to be when you've got people that you're getting on and off.
Yeah.
It doesn't look as disastrous as it might have.
Yeah, no, I think,
Okay,
and
well,
I,
I guess the bottom line is we'd like to help. We understand that this is going to be a somewhat of a turmoil for a while, but please keep us informed. Let us know what's happening. And in the meantime, we'll also, I think Jim Baker is going to be checking with DES on the STAR decisions that
Okay.
will be important here. And I see that Herschel Tanner is on too. Herschel, good to see you, or hear you, or see your presence. So Herschel has been involved in this quite a bit too. So thank you.
Glad to be
So
here.
let us know.
I was in the waiting room or whatever for a half hour, but I almost gave up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we couldn't see you from here. Jennifer just sent me a note. Sorry about that.
Okay, well, let us know
okay.
how we
will
can
do.
help you.
Okay, well, if that's
Thanks,
all you
Jennifer.
need from me,
Thank
I'll
you.
step out and let me know when your next meet. Y'all meet
bet.
quarterly? You meet quarterly? Okay.
Well,
So-
we meet quarterly, yes, and,
Okay.
as I said to Paul, we're going to start a series of meetings with the, older adults somehow. I don't know what venue we'll be using, but, you might want to join us for that.
Okay, definitely. And if you decide at some point you want to come to one of the sites, maybe after we've had the transportation going for a while and shuttle and speak with the participants, we could arrange that too. So,
You bet,
That's a good idea.
okay,
absolutely.
great.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. Take care.
Okay, so I'm not gonna go into the report, but I sent you copies of the comments. Did you all get those? Please go through those and see if we should add more or subtract some or whatever for the highlights and accomplishments for this year, as well as the committee goals for the upcoming year. And I did want to mention in some detail the idea of getting together with older adults. I have tried numerous times to get a hold of Davina Alston at Mary Marshall. You want to try that? I've got her number.
Sure, yeah.
And maybe you can come up with some ideas about how we can outreach.
Sure. Yeah, I'll be glad to reach out to her. And hopefully maybe Rachel or Helen might have some tips on if she's not responding. I'll work through them to see if she'll respond.
Yeah, and Erica is, she was the one who suggested Davina, so.
Yeah, and Erica's on that board. She's on the Mary Marshall.
Oh, is she?
There we go.
And I think Ann Herman is also involved with Mary Marshall.
Great, great. Okay, well, here's Davina's number. Anything you want to say about this seniors transportation study?
I'm not familiar.
You sent me a copy of it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I don't have any comments on it.
Okay, the only thing I had to say about Langston Boulevard study is that it's ongoing, it's massive, and we will somehow stay in touch with them. But it's a big deal.
So I will, I have one issue on Langston Boulevard that I'll harp on every chance I get. Which is when they look at the changes that they propose to Langston Boulevard, one of the things they're proposing is to eliminate the median that
Yes.
exists on Langston Boulevard, and I just think that's an incredibly wrong-minded perspective. I mean, the median exists, I think, for two reasons. One, it's a safety point when people are crossing the street, they can stop on the median and generally not get run over. And two, eliminating the median makes Langston Boulevard essentially like Route 50. I mean, cars will be right next to each other, going back and forth. It just seems incredibly unsafe.
And trying to cross the street under those
Right.
conditions.
Yeah, and especially for a corridor that they say they're gonna increase, commercial properties so that people are doing more shopping and going back and forth, much like they do in Clarendon or the courthouse. So I know it's probably gonna be a decision that the state makes and not the county.
Yeah.
But they're just going in the wrong direction from my perspective.
Yes, I agree with you.
It's sort of like they put something stupid in there so you can object to it, and then they give up and say, oh yeah, take it, you're right, you win.
The low hanging fruit.
Right, right.
Yeah, the other problem is that as you look at the streetscape, it changes, it must change 4 times in that short mileage. It's going to be pretty confusing.
Well, and it's gonna be impossible for for cars to turn into and out of things that are on the other side of the street. I mean, when you look at, there are just so many good examples of what happens at McDonald's.
Yeah.
Or what happens at Bank of America.
Yeah.
When the outbound traffic, somebody wants to make a left turn, they stop, everything stops behind them. It's a single lane going through.
Absolutely.
There's so many reasons why it's a bad decision.
Okay, anything else? Anybody? Roland, good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Didn't realize you guys have so much on your agenda. You really did.
Well, we do, and it's always interesting to, when you start looking at the transportation options that we have in Arlington versus, what's available in, say, South, Virginia, we're very lucky.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Okay,
All right.
thank you very much.
Good meeting.
Thank
Is
you.
there-
Herschel, nice to see you.
Good seeing you.
Is there